E. A. Wallis Budge's The Dwellers on the Nile, The Life, History, Religion, and Literature of the Ancient Egyptians. Chapter 10 is, what's the long name of this? The Egyptian Dead, Heaven and Hell, The Future Life. The later texts of the pyramids supply many interesting details concerning the existence of the beatified in heaven. The early conception of heaven was at once material and spiritual, and it never disappeared from the mind of the Egyptian. Now, a lot of Christians are going to criticize these so-called pagans and so-called heathens. You know, to the Romans, these words had nothing to do with what religion you were. But this is the insult the Christians have used, Gentile and all that. The material world is supposed to, you don't separate your spiritual life from the material world. All hail the God of this world and age, right? And it never disappeared from the mind of the Egyptian. The body of the king in heaven was as the body of a god, and his flesh and bones were those of a god. Well, I'm not sure everybody believed this. This is just what they wrote down, right? He walks among the living ones, and he becomes as a god, the son of a god. Ankhsu is the living ones, and Nature, say Nature. Each of his features, eyes, nose, mouth, cheeks, etc., is a feature of a god. And you can think of the reality as belonging to, manifesting qualities of not differing from, sort of a submission or surrender to God, as might be called. The entities elect him to be a member of their company, and the other two companies invite him to take his seat among them. He becomes not only her, the Horus, the personality, the son of Yusur, but Yusur himself. So he becomes, the sight exalted above the throne, sort of. Or at least that's the level he's identified with. It doesn't mean necessarily that he becomes that, but that's how the myth goes. He is the brother of the moon, the son of Sirius. Sothis? How do you say Sothis? Circe? Circe? I think it's Circe. But it's Circe. Anyways. And he strides over the heaven like Orion. I forget their name for Orion. The entities bow their heads to the ground before him, and he rules them all. Ra will not allow him to walk, but lifts him up on his shoulders and carries him about from place to place. He absorbs the power and wisdom of Tohote, who was the mind of Ra, and the advocate who obtained the verdict, innocent, for Yusur at the great trial, and so becomes the judge of the dead. Side by side with the entity, he sits on a great throne made of translucent material, which is decorated with heads of lions, and has feet in the form of hoods and bulls. He is arrayed in glorious apparel of the finest texture, similar to that worn by those who sit on the throne of living truth. On his head he wears the greatest of all crowns, which the entity set upon his head. He does not hunger or thirst or feel sadness. He eats the bread that Ra drinks daily, and he drinks what Ra drinks. His provisions are those that are decreed by Geb and by the utterances of the entities. Now, I thought we showed that it's not Geb, but Pob. Yeah. He eats and drinks what these entities eat. He drinks what they drink. He dwells as they dwell, and all the entities give him food that he might live. Oh, that he might not die. Okay. He dresses as the entities dress, and his garments are made of fine white linen. His feet are shod with sandals. He goes with the entities to the great lake in Sakset Hatep, round which the entities seat themselves together, and the great and imperishable entities give him to eat of the tree of life whereon they live, so that he likewise may live. Poon Oxnuxu Sun Yimph. And this is, if you didn't notice, it's different from the sun, which means mistake. So that's, that's a different word. So the bread that he eats never grows stale, for it is the bread of eternity. His beer never goes sour, for it is the beer of everlastingness. He is delivered from the power of those who would steal his food. Islam, for example, teaches that on the day of rising, the flatness of the purest, softest, the best, the finest quality of bread would be what the world turns into. So, but it never goes stale. That's the thing. Some mythologies, you got lakes of butter and milk and ghee and all sorts of stuff, but you never hear the aspects of the purity of them and how they don't go bad and stuff like this, which is because instantly when you hear those stuff, some of us are going to be wait, that's going to go bad real quick. So it's going to be a great paradise for about an hour, The bread he eats never grows stale, for it is the bread of eternity. His beer never goes sour, for it is the beer of because it is the beer of everlastingness. He is delivered from the power of those who would steal his food. And obviously the ill parts of intoxication wouldn't be part of paradise, right? He is washed clean, and his ka is washed clean, and they eat bread together. He goes round about heaven, even as do the 4 sons of Hur, and he partakes their figs and wine. He dwells without fear under the protection of the entities from those loins he came forth, and those who be his foes find that they are the enemies of Tamu. The boatmen who row Ra round him also. Those who row Ra beneath the horizon row him also. He entered heaven in the west of the sky, and he comes forth from the east thereof. The position of the king in the primitive Egyptian heaven of Ra is well described in the following address. Now therefore, O Pepe, he that hath given unto thee life and all power and eternity, and the power of speech is Ra. Thou hast induced thyself with the forms of the entity, and thou hast become magnified thereby before the entities who dwell on the lake. Hail, Pepe! Thy soul standeth among the entities, and among the shining ones, and the fear of thee striketh into their hearts. Hail, Pepe! Thou placest thyself among the thrones of him that dwelleth among the living ones, and the writing which thou hast is in their hearts. Thy name shall live upon the earth, thy name shall flourish upon the earth. Thou shalt neither perish nor be destroyed forever and ever. The king's position is in the kingdom of Yasir, and is thus described. Hail, Pepe! Thou hast arrived, thou art glorious, and thou hast gotten might, like the entity who is seated upon his throne, that is Yasir. Actually, the seated upon the throne is the later thing. It's sort of exalted beyond the throne. Situated ruling. So it's possible that Osiris, just like many other names, or you take away the personification, but the personification speaks about us and our flaws, really. Even though they're talking about something beyond human, right? Thy soul is in thy body, thy strong form is behind thee, thy crown is upon thy head, thy headdress is upon thy shoulders, thy face is before thee. Those who sing songs of joy are upon both sides of thee. The followers of the entity are behind thee, and those who accompany him are on both sides of thee. The entity cometh, Pepe, hath come upon the throne of Yasur, the glorious dweller in the Natat, the divine dweller in the Tani. So Osiris and Abydos, right, hath arrived. Yust speaketh to thee, and this holdeth converse with thee, and the spirits come and bow down at thy feet by reason of the writing for which thou hast, O Pepe, in the region of Sa. Thou comest to thy mother, Nut, who strengtheneth thy arm, and maketh a way for thee through the sky to the place where Ra is. Thou hast opened the gates of the sky and the doors of the celestial ocean. Thou didst find Ra. Thou didst find Ra, who protected thee, and took thee by thy hand, and brought thee into the two heavens, and set thee upon the throne of Yasir. Throne belonging to Osiris, right? Hail, Pepe, for the eye of her hath come to hold converse with thee. As a son fighteth for his father, and as her defended his father, even so hath her defended Pepe against his enemies. Now, if we take away the personification, the pluralization, and all that, we don't think of one name of divinity versus another name isn't father and son and other things like that. That's not good. I joint crunched. And thou art defended and endowed in every way like an entity, and thou standest equipped with all the attributes of Yasur upon the throne of Kente Imte. And definitely you want to be in line with all divine attributes. You don't per se become a god and this, that, and the other, but you want to be in line with that. All your members are not rebelling. They're actually actively manifesting various qualities that remind of God. The heaven of Ra, through representing ancient solar beliefs, did not appeal to the Egyptians generally, for it was too exclusive, and its entity was too great and too remote to ever become an object of willing and affectionate worship. Well, that's the Christian way seeping in, right? Is that, transcendent, all-powerful God. You can't worship that. You have to worship something more relatable to the human being. You see a variety of monotheism and polytheism in pretty much every ancient culture. The king, being considered part god, would naturally find happiness there with his fellow so-called gods, but it offered no attractions to the slave, the peasant, and the lower classes of the population in cities and towns. The cult of Ra was essentially the cult of the court and noblemen, and the democratic instinct of the Egyptian, which always was and still is extremely sensitive, revolted against all aristocratic authority in religion. The Egyptians as a nation loved to worship Yasir, and as a man who had been persecuted and slain by his enemies, and had risen from the dead, having triumphed over the power of death and the grave, and became as a god and judge of the dead. They felt that Yasir, the man, would understand men and sympathize with them in their sorrows and troubles, and the people as a whole placed their hopes of immortality in Yasir, who made men and women to be born again. Maset Mu. And I don't remember what that little, kind of like an owl, but it's like it's got horns, and then the hoof thing, is that a hen? Yeah, I think that's a hen. In the Book of the Dead, chapter 100 182, number 16. In the heaven of Yasur, they hoped to live a life which was to all intents and purposes a glorified duplicate of that which they led upon earth. There they expected to find their kinsfolk and friends, and to know them, and to be known by them. Reunion and recognition with them in the other world were necessities to them. Their wishes in this respect are well expressed in a text written on a coffin in Cairo. The deceased Sepa prays, saying, Hail Ra, Hail Tem, Hail Pob, Hail Nut. Grant ye to Sepa that he may travel over the heavens, and over the earth, and over the waters, that he may meet his ancestors. May meet his father, may meet his mother, may meet his grown-up sons and daughters, his brothers and his sisters, may meet his friends, both male and female, may meet his foster parents and his kinsfolk, and those who have done work for him upon the earth, both male and female, and may meet the woman whom he loved and knew. Sepa goes on to say that if for any reason his father or his mother or his ancestors or his children, brothers and sisters and kinsfolk and friends be prevented from having reunion with him, no more offerings shall be made to Ra, but if they be allowed to come to him and be with him as they were upon earth, whether it be in heaven, or on the earth, or in the Duat, or in the Nile, or in Busiris, or Abydos, or elsewhere, the usual offerings shall be made to Ra, and the circumpolar stars and the planets shall tow the boat of Ra over the sky as usual. The text ends with an assurance from the demoness Hathor that Sepa may enter the other world with confidence, knowing that his ancestors will come to meet him, and that they will rejoice in seeing him, and that they will bear in their hands staves and mattocks and plows and weapons, and be ready to deliver him from the attacks of any malevolent entity. The prayer of Sepa, given above, was, in one form or another, prayed by every follower of Yasir during the whole course of dynastic history. And section 11 to this is, something on page 115. The bull. The cult of the bull Apis and of the bull Menephis was established officially at Memphis and Heliopolis, respectively, under the Second Dynasty, but the worship of these sacred beasts in Egypt generally and in Nubia was common many centuries, perhaps even thousands of years earlier. Another sacred bull, called Baka, was worshipped at Kakam, i.e. the town of the Black Bull, at a very early period. Many of the kings of Egypt delighted to call themselves Mighty Bull, Ka-Nekht. And the bull appears frequently in the Horus names of many kings of the 18th dynasty. Yemenhotep I called himself Conquering Bull. Thothmes I claimed to be the mighty bull, whose marvels were great. I don't remember how to pronounce penis. The thing with the hand, Burr, and a head on a sled of some sort. I don't quite remember how to pronounce that at the moment. Thothmes II proclaimed himself to be the mighty bull, preeminent in valor. And I don't remember how to pronounce that. Well, parts of it anyways. And in remote times, a king of the Second Dynasty called himself Bull of Bulls. Something with the oo at the end, right? The end bull was applied also to the entities, and Ysir was often addressed as Bull of Ymantit. Nikt. Ymantit. Okay, yeah, that's right. Many historical texts mention the bellowings. Humpt of the king, and bellowings of Thothmosis III resounded to make the uttermost parts of the earth and make the people there quake. In the Kuban stele of Ramses II, the mighty bull is said to have had trampled down the Nubians under his hooves and have gored them with his horns. The mighty bull was ready for action. Dasuxru, and his horns were always ready to gore. Dahaha, or something like that. These last words became a title of Alexander the Great, which the Arabs have prescribed in Vulgarnain. Actually, no. Cyrus the Great would have made far more sense, or more ancient king. But some people that say they're Muslim believe this. It's not supported by Quran and Hadith, but the skin of the bull played an important part in ancient Egyptian religious ceremonies, and the Maasai and many other African peoples bury their dead kings wrapped up in the skins of bulls. The following hymn to the king of Timbuktu is by His Majesty's Poet Laureate, and New Monthly Magazine for 1824 has this: Hu Tamarama, bow now. Slamarambo, pig. Hurrah for the son of the sun. Hurrah for the brother of the moon. Throughout all the world there is none like Kuwashabu, the only one, descended from the great baboon, descended from the great baboon, buffalo of the buffaloes, bull of bulls. He sits on a throne of his enemies' skulls, and if he wants others to play at football, ours are at his service. All. Hugabooja, Hugabooja, hail to the royal Kuashabu, Emperor and Lord of Timbuktu. Timbuktu, of course, is a real place that people don't quite get that too much. But I'm going to close this by showing you something that my understanding of it not only led me away from my church, but it also pointed me towards greater Egyptology. It wasn't just the facsimiles. I'm not seeing them, but there's 3 facsimiles here. And this is not properly reconstructed, nor is it translated there. Of course, these things were Devonized into Christian meaning. And even if you don't know anything about the secret temple ceremonies, which they've sworn to keep secret, but people have released them, Osiris, Urius right there, and, obviously we're not talking about what they say, but just like tarot cards, people can look at stuff and have meanings that are different. People can look at stuff and say, well, in my path we see this, and that's how it should be. We should be able to look at most mythology and see it line up with most of our own. No matter what that path is, that's really how it works. I'm not saying that there's not differing degrees of good and truth, and in some paths that have not, as I've said, surrendered and become every part of me. There's no part of me that is not of the God. Every group that hasn't done that, there's certain degrees of evil and ignorance, and obviously gaps that aren't addressed. But let me end this by saying, first of all, comment in whatever as one wants. I'm open to more information on any of these things. Sharma, peace be upon you.